In some of his writings, Douglas Harding, 20th century mystic, who I've made 2 videos about before, he makes reference to 2 different kinds of bodily experiences, 2 different kinds of bodies really. And here I'm thinking about not so much his most famous book on having no head, but some of his later stuff. In all of his work, he kind of puts forward, just a bit of background, in all of his work he kind of puts forward a kind of method of what we might call enlightenment, I suppose, or a way of experiencing the self, one's relationship to the world, in a way which provides kind of experiential support for a kind of non-dual, enlightened way of looking at the world. That's kind of how I interpret his project. And as I say, in some of his writings, he kind of supports that project by distinguishing 2 ways of looking at the world, and specifically talking about what bodies look like and what bodies are experienced like. And he's talking specifically about heads, and he uses the human head, and particularly the human eye, the act of looking and visualizing, as tools for this kind of explication. And he says that when you look out into the world, you look around and here are all these people around us. And all of these people, he says, seem to have this, what he calls a top knot, this large fleshy lump at the top of their neck. They all have a head, he says. And there they all are, all these people with heads around us. But he says, when you look down at yourself, there is no head. You know, you can see your feet, you can see your chest, your arms. And then above the level of your chest, he says, you kind of fade, not so much into nothingness, but you kind of fade into the world. I guess it's kind of taking the evidence of your eyes, and I stress eyes rather than visual system, taking the evidence of your eyes very, very literally. So that there are your feet, there's your legs, there's your body, and then from where, well, at least from where I'm looking, there is the canal path, and there is the canal, and there is the sky, and it's all kind of connected up in that way. So, so where the head would be in other people, in those 2 people you see around you, in kind of visually examining yourself, that's where the world is. The world is where the head would be, which is an insane and it's picturesque and interesting image, but it is strange, undoubtedly. But one of the ways I'm thinking about that is in this distinction between these 2 bodies that he's making and how that might map onto other kinds of understandings. I think I mentioned before that I think kind of phenomenological approaches are quite useful in talking about Harding's work. And here I'm thinking about the distinction that I think it's Hussel makes between, get this right, he's writing in German. I think he writes about 2 kinds of bodies, what he calls Korper, K-O-R-P-E-R, and Leib, L-E-I-B. And Korper, I think, is a kind of German term for the body as a kind of object. I think it's where the words like corpse come from. It's this body as seen from the outside. Certainly material and physical, but it is this kind of outside view of a body. And of course, if you are outside of a body, if you look at another person's body, you see them in their entirety. You see this strange fleshy lump at the top of their neck, and that would be the Korper. But in Hussel he has this alternative view, which is what he calls Leib, L-E-I-B, which is the body as experienced kind of from the inside. It's the phenomenological body. The body as a kind of sensory motor, somatosensory system, which kind of finds itself in relation to the world, or mutually arises with the experiences of the world that the body allows and brings into being. So my body here on this canal path, my Leib in Husselian terms, is the sight that my eyes are mutually creating with the objects around me. It's that feeling at the soles of what I'm calling my feet, which is arising out of a relationship between my body and the ground. It's the feeling the wind across my hands, which again is an arising from this relationship between those hands and the passage of air and so on. So all those somatosensory experiences, taken collectively, form what Hussel calls a Leib, that kind of body as seen from the inside. And in that sense, at least visually, I have no head. Just to support what Harding's saying, he does talk about other ways of experience. He does say, yes, well, I feel my head, of course it's there, and that's fine. He doesn't say an awful lot about that, because as I say, his project is primarily to mobilise visual ways of understanding the world. But there is, I think there is a relationship there between what he's talking about and that Husserlian terms. And I think you also find that in other aspects of phenomenology. This book that I've just been in the middle of reading, actually, Sean Gallagher and Dan Zahavi's book, called The Phenomenological Body. Again, in that they very clearly make this distinction between, I think they refer to it as the objective body, but it might be called something else, I can't remember, which is this visually apprehended body as seen from the outside, a kind of third-person perspective on the body, and they make a distinction from that and the first-person perspective of the body, which again is accessed via the somatosensory system. It is the equivalent of Husserl's Leib. It is pre-reflective, I think, it's fair to say. It's not the body you see in a mirror, either literally or metaphorically. It is the body as you experience it, which isn't prior to conceptualization. So again, I think there's that relationship which Harding talks about. And interestingly, in Harding's work, although his work is, I'm not sure conceptual is the right word, but he does provide kind of analytical frameworks. Certainly, if, I've done some workshops and been along some of the various meetings of people who practice Harding's techniques. And one of the things that they talk about quite often, and one of the I'm not sure if tenets is the right word, but one of the ideas is that conceptualization is not always a good thing. In regard, quite often it's felt that an over-analytical approach to Harding's work is counterproductive, which I don't agree with, but I can kind of see where they're coming from, in the sense that if you're aiming for a pre-conceptual relationship to the world, yeah, is that right? Pre-conceptual? Yeah, I guess, or pre-reflective relationship to the world. If you're trying to see yourself not as others see you, not as reflected in the mirror, but try to see yourself from the inside and take that seeing literally, then conceptualization, which does tend to place you outside of yourself, could be counterproductive. As I say, I don't really agree with that, but I can see the logic. I haven't read much about Harding recently, actually. I used to do his exercises quite regularly, but I haven't done them for ages. But I still think it's, I do still find it quite informing of my thoughts, really, my way of being, I suppose.